Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere. This is Chris Parker, and we're getting very close to the day that I can shave it again. I can get rid of this mustache. I was thinking when I started the month I might like it, and actually I don't, but I'm sticking with it through the month of Movember. And Movember is, again, the month where we are raising awareness for men's health. And I like to expand that to people's health and really focusing on mental health. So my call to action this whole month is think about someone you know, care about, and haven't maybe spoken to lately, and reach out to them and let them know you're there and that you care about them. And that could mean really, all the difference in someone's life during this crazy time. Now, I am here with Anastasia Borovykh, and that is not how her last name is pronounced in her actual Russian, but we're not going to go there. Maybe we'll go there during the conversation. And Anastasia is, I think, one of the founders of Skilabs. And Skilabs is part of the Startup and Residence program through the city of Amsterdam. And we're going to talk all about all those dimensions and how we know each other. But before we do that, get into all the details, Anastasia, welcome. And can you please share with me and everyone else, what is it that you do and why do you do what you do?
Thank you for having me. Well, I think what is it that we do? Basically at Skilabs, what we currently do is we try to optimize waste collection in the city. So essentially streamlining everything from the collection, so the routes that the driver is going to be driving, to the actual processing of all of the orders, to then potentially bringing it to the recycling. We didn't really start out necessarily with this idea, so I can't make a whole story that I've been passionate about waste collection since I was born or whatever. I think we ended up here after many iterations on our product. So having first tried out one thing, then another thing, and something completely different again, until we finally thought, okay, let's stick with this direction of waste collection, which is what we're doing now.
Nice. And let me dive deeper into the question, because that was a bit about what Skilabs do, but what do you do? And the reason I'm really interested is looking at your profile. You're probably the second most, based on your credentials, the second most intelligent person I've ever had on this podcast. And you have been, going through, you have a PhD, amongst other degrees. You speak multiple languages. What is it that you do? Like what drives you to, those lengths of academic study and now entrepreneurial activities?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very big shoes to fill, saying that I'm the second smartest person that you know. Yeah, I think both of my parents essentially have a PhD. So kind of this whole story about PhDs in academia, I was, at least I was kind of growing up around it a lot. Initially, I didn't necessarily want to go in the academic direction. I guess this is something very common. If your parents have done something, at some point you think, I'm going to go in a totally different direction. But as it turned out, when I started to go into this different direction, I actually found out that I do really enjoy mathematics, which is the field that I did my PhD in. Everything around it, from the applications that you can use it for to the mathematics itself. So that's kind of how I ended up with a PhD. And from that point onwards, I guess what drives me, why do I do what I do? I think it's just an interesting thing to kind of challenge yourself and to try to learn as many things as I can, which is also why we started the company. Obviously, it was something that I had never done before. I didn't really know how to do it, but that's why I thought, okay, let's try to do it. Let's see how it's going to go. Yeah, I think that's basically the only thing that I try to do in life. Just learn as much as I can, explore as much as I can, and try to get better at the things I do. Yeah.
Definitely a sense of curiosity there. And in previous discussions, if I remember correctly, Skilabs came from a desire to see, I guess, mathematics or some of these capabilities in real life. And so like, making them a real tangible impact. What was that story about?
Yeah, so I kind of worked on like the intersection between the actual theoretical mathematics and some of the applications where you could use mathematics. However, nevertheless, even though it is applied math, it's still very far from actually being applied to right now solve like a real world problem. And that is something that we were interested in exploring. So can we, instead of just writing these research papers where we touch upon the fact that these methods could be applied in a real world scenario, can we actually try to apply it in a real world setting? And what would it mean? How would we do it? Would it even work in real life? That's also a big question. And I think this is also the thing that I learned like in the last year that we have been working with Skilabs, is that it's a totally different thing of like writing a research paper versus like creating a product that actually people are going to be willing to pay for, that is going to actually help them, that is going to be useful. And on the other hand, also a product that we can implement relatively fast, relatively good. Because for a research paper, it's in a way, if I have a problem and I come up with a solution and the solution is relatively interesting and novel, then you can write a paper on it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a good product that you're going to be able to sell, because there are just a lot of other things you have to look into as well.
And your world, if I understand correctly, is actually in Skilabs. So it's, starting and running this business, and you have multiple customers, and you're still involved in academic research. So I'm curious, having, successfully started a business now, has that changed how you're doing your actual research? Is it maybe grounding it more into, I don't want to call reality, because that term is hard to define, but has it impacted the other way as well?
I think it actually has gone a little bit the other way around. So basically, my research now is even more theoretically oriented than it was before. Like we are very much proving, for example, the convergence rates of various optimization algorithms. It has still the applications as well. Like we're always looking at where could this be applied, but I wouldn't say the research has gotten necessarily any more applied. But what I do want to say, so in research also an interesting thing is kind of getting a lot of citations for your paper. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it's the ultimate goal to get a paper that's going to be cited a lot, because it doesn't necessarily mean that much. But there are papers out there that are getting hugely picked up on by lots of different authors in many different fields. And the thing that I kind of understood, having also gone through kind of this thought process of like what makes a good product, what makes a product something that people are going to be willing to use, customers are going to be willing to pay for. It is kind of similar to also writing a paper that is potentially going to get cited a lot. Like there are certain aspects that you want to include in your paper to show that on the one hand it works, on the other hand it's going to be relatively easy for other users or other readers to implement. Also, it obviously has to have something novel that the other works don't have. So I think this kind of feeling for what could potentially lead to a more picked up on research paper, that is something that I kind of connected with startup stuff.
Nice. And then coming back, taking that research and then applying it through Skilabs. Last year, I think, in the Startup in Residence program, was that your first customer? Because I know you've done some things with Delft and the city of Amsterdam. What's the story of the business? So you came up with an idea that, hey, we want to optimize routes, and then you just said, hey, let's go build a company. So what was the evolution of that? How'd that come to be?
It was even a lot more far from already having this route idea. We initially just thought that we were going to be, I don't know, I think one of the co-founders, he had heard about this concept called a digital twin. And a digital twin was something that at that time was being used for like modeling many kinds of processes that big industrial companies could have. And then we thought, okay, digital twins, that sounds like something cool. Potentially we could also do something in there, because it was on the one hand something that could be applied to real life problems. On the other hand, it was something that had a lot of deep maths in it as well. So to actually model all the processes in a complicated system. So that was basically the only kind of vague idea that we had. And then we were very lucky, because someone at the institute that we were working at, he connected us with this program, Startup in Residence, or at least he showed us basically that this program existed. And then we applied, and we were all very nervous whether or not we were going to get selected, because this was kind of like, this would have been the start of it if we were selected, and we would not have had any idea of what to do if we would have not been selected. So we applied, and then it as always, like a very long wait, but then we did get selected. So we did roll into this program of Startup in Residence. And the nice thing with that program is that the municipality actually proposes the challenges that they have. So in this case, the municipality of Amsterdam, they had set out a few different issues or challenges that they were facing with managing operations in the city. So that's project and that problem that they had set out, that it essentially formed our whole direction. And I think we were also very, very, very lucky in that sense, because so this program also gives you like a launching customer. So potentially if things go well, you could also immediately launch your product with this customer. And we were hugely lucky here, because when our product was still like a very vague idea consisting of a couple of slides, our launching customer already had decided to take a chance on us while we literally didn't have anything yet. So, I mean, I think we're infinitely thankful for that, because that was the whole launching of everything.
Well, I think that's a bit of a dream come true in startup land, meaning who's your customer and what is their problem? You know, I've seen many, entrepreneurs and teams just seek those things and never find them and fail. So for the Startup in Residence program, and I haven't mentioned it, but you're in the Startup in Residence program the second time, and I'm the mentor in that program, and that's how we met. So there's so I'm really very fortunate for that. And I also am a huge fan of the program, basically because of what you said. It's not a accelerator incubator where they just sort of give you cash and give you some training and good luck. It's really connecting to stakeholders, buyers in the city that have a problem, and streamlining the procurement process, which I think is actually genius. And in your case is one of those success cases. So can you describe a little bit on what was the solution that you finally developed for the city of Amsterdam last year, and then maybe we'll get into a little bit about what we're scratching our head around this year.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, I agree first of all with what you're saying, because especially for us, having come from like totally outside of anything related to what was in the end going to be our products, we had no idea what were the things to pay attention to. So whether we had no idea of what the problems that the business was facing. So this program was super valuable for us to get an inside look and to really learn like what are the issues that they face. So basically what that amounted to last year is that our launching customer was the waste collection, the business waste collection of Amsterdam. And we got to go on like a few trips with the waste collectors. We really got to experience how the process was being implemented, also seeing it from the administrative side, how were things being handled. And then basically we could point out a few, I wouldn't say flaws, but things, let's say inefficiencies that they had in their current system and that they themselves were also unhappy with. So for example, the route optimization that they used wasn't fully perfect because it didn't account for certain restrictions or actually places that the vehicle is allowed to drive. So it ended up with the driver just driving his own route, which can obviously lead to suboptimalities. And the same thing with kind of the whole process of managing the client database and the invoicing, and everything around that. There were also a few things that they had issues with. So then we came up with this idea of streamlining kind of waste collection from the customer through the driver to the administration of the waste company itself. We try to include some of like the smart optimization, machine learning in it in the back end. So indeed, the route engine, we try to make it as smart as possible, learn from the driver's preferences, incorporate any of these city restrictions, predicting like the amounts of waste that can be expected to make everything a lot more fine-tuned and a lot more optimized. And then we also have 3 applications where we really try to make sure that the applications that the driver, client, and administration is going to be using, that they're as convenient for them as possible, so that they actually enjoy using them instead of kind of ignoring them and resorting back to their own routes or anything. So that is our current product. And then we have a lot of ideas for extending it to lots of crazy things that we think could potentially be useful. And then the second question was what we are doing this year, I guess.
Yeah. So if last year was waste and this year is bicycles, maybe give us a little. And this project this year, of course, is just started about a month or so ago. So we're still orienting on what the actual problem is and how you could possibly solve it. And you're, investigating the data sources. So it's still early days. But what's your perspective on the project, the second project that you were invited to join?
Yeah, so I think the idea is to very much reuse some of the things that we've done, but just for a different application. And this is maybe also still something that we struggle with in a startup itself, like whether we should really stick with one particular direction. Okay, waste collection is now our thing, so we're fully focused on that, or whether we also should still branch out to potential other opportunities. And the second thing is what we are still doing. We are kind of keeping an eye on where else could our back end, so this routing engine that I just said and this machine learning part, be of interest. And that is exactly where the bikes fit in. We are exploring if indeed we can kind of analyze, understand, and optimize bike flows in the city, and then potentially also make like an application for or more connect with an existing application, I would say, where we could give advice on like the routes that are possible to travel for the cyclist. Routes that are more convenient, more comfortable, that avoid crowded areas, that are more healthy in terms of like driving next to a park instead of driving next to a super crowded road. But the particular applications, as you say, I think they still very much need to form. So we are very much in the exploring phases here.
And for me, it's a nice dimension of the program where you have a client within the city, and that client is your stakeholder, potential buyer, and in this case, that individual I think has also been really good at connecting you to other parties and other potential buyers and stakeholders in the city, and also unearthing other projects and initiatives around this and other data sets. And what I'm already seeing a big benefit, I think, for the city, just the alignment and collaboration across all these initiatives. I think that's already, because there's so much going on in Amsterdam. There's a few bikes in Amsterdam, and it seems to be a hot topic for the city. And I think we've got another 5 months or so of that, and then see what happens. So if we look back to Skilabs, and you mentioned whether to focus on one, I guess one solution or more of a generic backend. If you talk about waste collection, what would the perfect customer be? So outside of the city of Amsterdam, who would other customers be in that? Like who else could benefit from this?
Well, I think basically any waste collection company. So there are big companies out there, big private companies that are collecting waste. Again, also some waste collections are being operated by other municipalities in other cities. So those are the two big ones. So municipalities and existing large companies. And at the same time, a very exciting and new potential customer are waste collectors that are using more green vehicles, so let's say bikes or electric vehicles, to collect waste and then also immediately bring it to a recycling firm. This is particularly exciting because they are collecting waste from different businesses as well, and they are collecting it in different separate waste streams, so that the waste streams can immediately be recycled instead of bringing them to a typical waste depot. So these are companies that are typically still smaller, but I think that could potentially be growing, especially in cities like Amsterdam, where, for example, driving with a bike is potentially a lot easier than driving with a big truck. Easier in terms of like the congestion that you create in the cities, the extra noise that you create, etc. There are also very cool initiatives where they are planning, for example, to collect waste via the waterways in Amsterdam, which I think is also very interesting and exciting to do to potentially do route optimization for that. So I guess that's the things we are focusing on.
You mean with boats, I guess? So that there's
exactly, yeah.
Oh wow, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Sometimes in the city, people do waste optimization just by throwing all their junk in the canals, and then later they come out and pull it all out, which I don't think is very efficient at all or nice.
No,
but it certainly happens. I had a conversation with a gentleman, Gift Lubele, and I just love his name. Gift Lubele is a gentleman from South Africa, and on that conversation, he explained that he's creating a platform for the informal trash collectors in South Africa, and these are typically middle-aged ladies who, like, 5 a.m, go around neighborhoods into people's houses and picking out the valuable stuff and then bringing it to central locations that sometimes are put on some sort of sub truck something, and then bring it to other locations. So I think definitely listen to that conversation in addition to, because I don't think they're doing route optimization, but it's more tracking and also having a payments, because it's kind of a cash-based ecosystem, which doesn't mean it's always safe. And so there's really interesting work doing there. And then the contact details for Gift is also there. And I would be, if you see a click, I would be delighted to connect you. So as far as I guess trash collecting companies, are these corporates as well, or is it or to only be the people who actually driving trash trucks around? And I guess those are pretty expensive things in optimizing, because there's humans involved, which are, need to have their own, health and safety as well as cost managed. Are these some of the things that you can optimize for?
I think potentially at a later stage. I guess indeed right now we are focusing more on simply the routes. So how they can drive. And we do try to account a little bit for indeed the comfort of the driver and make sure that he's also willing to follow the route, because if it's something that's not comfortable for him, then he's not going to do it. But yeah, I think this is the thing, like when we at some point set out this direction, like, okay, waste is really something that we're going to be focusing on. That's when I realized how extremely, extremely cool it is. Like this application that you just named, that's amazing. Waste is something that we create, all of us, every day. Like now that I'm working on it, I notice how much waste I myself, like a relatively small girl, am creating every single day. And it's a process that if we can somehow make it better, optimize it, recycle it better, then you have such a great impact, which makes it super exciting. And the different solutions that people are proposing around the world, they're also, it's just great. It's very cool.
Yeah, and the, with more people on the planet, more waste. And so, we have to get smarter with that in itself. I'm also, like with ocean cleanup and those types of things, because there's waste collection going on at massive scales that way as well. But, I think that's the thing with what you're doing. There's so many opportunities to optimize. I can imagine it's hard to have that. So with you and your, I think you have one other managing partner or owner in the company. How do you go about having that conversation on what do you do with the company? What's your process, or how does that dialogue go?
Well, I think this is also something that we really had to learn along the way. Like, again, my co-founder, he's also an academic like me. So when we started out, we had no idea about things like business plans, value propositions, product market fits, financials, all these things. We had literally no clue. Again, where the last year startup in residence program was super valuable is exactly in teaching us the value of some of these ideas and concepts and words. But I think me and my co-founder, we kind of like, I enjoy the fact that we are a very good fit. So he is at times very positive, while I'm kind of overly negative, or as I like to say, realistic. He's a very good engineer. He's like the best engineer, or one of the best engineers that I know. So that's amazing. Where I'm kind of more focused on the market side of things, setting up meetings and the actual administration of the whole process. So in that sense, we fit well, I guess. And we kind of found a way of working that works for the both of us. So that's really nice. And in terms of things like direction in which to take the company, I think we both have a lot of ideas. And then once in a while, we kind of discussed, I think actually every week we discuss them, where to go, which feature is something that could be good to implement, which feature is going to take us too much time that we're not really necessarily willing to implement right now. A lot of these discussions we are having on a weekly basis. And we kind of, we see how we go. We have several ideas that we really love to implement on the long term, but we're also very flexible to just see like if what we learn about the market and what we learn about the potential needs of potential customers, we try to adapt to that essentially, if that makes any sense.
Well, it makes perfect sense. And I think some of the most, I guess, I call it satisfied or comfortable people that I've interviewed are oftentimes don't have MBAs, because I have an MBA, and I think we over structure and over buzzword everything, and have a stack of books. Literally I have a stack of books behind me that sometimes we consider them to be gospel, and when actually we should just have a conversation and listen to what our customer wants. So it can be that easy. I think to have some reflection time and maybe some advice now and again to make sure you're not making just, complete amateur mistakes, but, you have already created your company and you have multiple, large scale customers in a couple of cities. So, definitely you're on your way. Now, where you want to go from there, who's to say that?
I think it makes sense, but I do think it is very valuable to indeed connect with people that do have MBAs or that are a lot more experienced than me on like the sales or marketing or product side of things. So also in the last year, I received a lot of help on like fine-tuning our business plan, determining marketing strategies, those kind of things. And they were all from people with more of an MBA kind of background. And that was super valuable. I did actually think about doing an MBA at some point myself. Like, I think having a PhD and an MBA is maybe a bit of an overkill. But then I kind of decided against it. But why did you decide to do it? And do you feel like it helped you in any way?
And another question I would ask is, in today's day and age, would I do the same thing? I think that's a different dimension. That for me, I did my MBA at Nyaroda. And for me, it was really perfect, because I was doing large scale software implementations with Baan, which is was a Dutch software company, coming up to the year 2000. So I'm starting to age myself a little bit, and realizing that basically consulting party was going to end. And if I wanted to maintain, academic growth at the time, an MBA was a way to go. So what I did is I was literally in Santa Clara in Silicon Valley. We were doing some projects with some semiconductor companies there. And I was at Santa Clara. I love telling this story. I was in Santa Clara at Barnes & Noble, drinking my coffee, Starbucks in Barnes & Noble, and reading a MBA book. And then I was looking for international projects that time. And I wrote Nijin Road. So Nijin Road. And so I called my friend Jeroen over here and said, "What's Nijin Road?" He laughed at me. "Oh, you mean Nyaroda?" And he said, "Oh, that's the business school that people go to if they can't get into a real school here in the Netherlands." I'm like, "Oh, what? Really?" Because he went to, I think, the Technical University of Eindhoven. So he was, he had a different view on business schools. And then I flew myself over, and they had a castle, and like, all right, I'm doing this. I'm going to, I cannot say no to a business school that has a castle.
Yeah.
The fun part of it was that it was a joint program with Stellenbosch and Kellogg. And Kellogg, of course, is the top B school in the States. And so for me, it was a brilliant way from California through Europe back into Chicago in order to get that. And it really worked out. Now, the benefit of it was when I landed in 2001 in the Netherlands, basically just as an American person, I had a 9-road MBA, which I think in Europe, at least in the Netherlands, people look at paperwork more than they do in the States. Because, and so when I came here, I know, okay, that was sort of my ticket in. And in a way that sort of set the tone for the rest of my, experience here so far. So for me, definitely in hindsight, if I had the wherewithal to have started a business, like you have, and learned that way and kept a balance between maybe the theoretical startup stuff and then really learn while doing. I probably would have preferred to actually have learned by really doing earlier in my career, if that's a very long answer.
I think that makes sense. I guess I would say there's value in both. We don't get to explore certain things because also we have to kind of keep things going. So also looking back at the past year, we have all made a lot of mistakes in terms of like the way to do the business. So having had like some theoretical knowledge, if we would say, would have been very valuable in the beginning. But
I think maybe with your background of some sort of academic rigor, you would have stuck to it more. But there's, I'm seeing failure and mistakes, certainly by me, and I have an accounting degree and an MBA and certifications of all sorts of business stuff. And I'm making stupid amateur mistakes every day, so I think, at the end, there is a learning by doing. And maybe there's maybe you can shorten the fall or shorten the waist if you have a bit of the theory. So we're starting to wrap up. But one thing I would love to hear is, over the last, 2 or so years on this journey, what is maybe the best thing you've learned from someone else as far as a business concept or a business lesson that you would have maybe otherwise have done something more foolish? So what was the best piece of mentoring or coaching advice you've received?
I think that's a very hard question, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer with like one particular piece of advice. I think, I don't know, I guess something that I would say is you really at least for me, I really had to like overcome some of the, let me say it like this. There were just a lot of things that we had to try and essentially see what kind of happened. And along the way, I feel like there have been so many people that have all taught us a very cool or useful lesson. So literally anyone, like again, as I said, from the first client who was like, let's take a chance on these guys with only their PowerPoint presentation and a vague demo, to people that spend their free time in helping me fine tune my business deck, which I had no idea how to make a good business deck. So that was hugely valuable. To even like the investors or clients that we spoke to that didn't necessarily end up becoming our investors or customers, they all kind of helped shape our product. So I think there's not one big thing that I learned. I think it's all made of like a million small things, all of them fueled by many, many, many different people. Again, I think without the people that we met, we would never have even gotten close to where we are essentially.
Well, what I love about your story is maybe because you don't yet have the MBA, you didn't believe that you had all the answers yet. And and what I've also experienced in the sessions that we've had during this Startup in Residence is you are very open and curious. And I think that openness and curiousness is going to bring you and your co-founder and your team a long, long, long way. So if people, meaning waste companies or maybe bicycle management companies, are interested in learning more, they can go to skialabs.com, and that's SKIA labs.com. And also Anastasia Borovykh on LinkedIn. You can find her there as well. Are those the best ways for people to reach out that or maybe are triggered? And I hope they are, that if someone has large vehicles, driving around in a suboptimal way, and with your background of data gathering and analysis and optimization, you can probably help them somehow, at least have a conversation with them. Is that the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, either through the contacts on the website or through my LinkedIn, whatever is all works. I will see everything, so that should all be fine.
Great. Thank you so much. And I will put these links on the podcast show note page as well. So people, wherever you're listening or watching this, you can click through and you can find Skilabs and Anastasia that way as well. So Anastasia, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining. And I will at least speak to you very soon as part of the Startup in Residence project. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me. I think this is great what you do.
Learn more at ebullient.com/podcast.